In the heart of a bustling city, where skyscrapers towered over narrow streets and the hum of traffic never seemed to fade, there lived a man named Marcus. He was tall, with broad shoulders that hinted at a strength now hidden beneath layers of hardship. His dark skin bore the marks of countless suns, and his eyes carried a depth of sorrow that only those who had seen too much could understand. Marcus sat on the cold pavement outside an abandoned building, wrapped in a tattered blanket that offered little warmth against the biting wind. A cardboard sign beside him read, "Anything helps." Few people paid attention to him as they hurried past, clutching coffee cups or scrolling through their phones. To most, he was just another faceless figure in the crowded urban landscape. A statistic, a problem too big for anyone to solve. But Marcus wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, he had worn a uniform that commanded respect. He had been part of something greater than himself, serving his country with pride and honor. Those days felt like a distant memory now, buried under years of pain, loss, and misfortune. Marcus's journey into homelessness began shortly after he returned from active duty. The transition to civilian life had been harder than he expected. The world he came back to felt alien, loud, chaotic, and indifferent. Nightmares haunted him, replaying scenes of war he wished he could forget. Sleep became elusive, and when it did come, it was restless. The camaraderie he once shared with his fellow soldiers was replaced by isolation. Friends drifted away, unable to relate to the invisible wounds he carried. Family tried to help, but eventually even they grew tired of his struggles. One bad decision led to another, and before he knew it, Marcus found himself living on the streets. Life as a homeless person was brutal. Every day was a battle, not against enemies armed with guns, but against hunger, cold, and the judgmental stares of strangers. Marcus learned quickly how to survive. He scavenged for food in trash bins behind restaurants, drank water from Publix, fountains, and sought shelter wherever he could find it. Sometimes, kind-hearted individuals would offer him a few coins or a sandwich, but more often than not, he faced hostility. People shouted insults at him, accusing him of laziness or drug addiction without knowing anything about his story. It hurt, but Marcus tried not to let it get to him. Instead, he focused on getting through each day, one step at a time. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Marcus noticed two men approaching him. They were dressed in flashy clothes, expensive sneakers, gold chains glinting in the fading light, and walked with an air of arrogance that made them stand out. These weren't ordinary passers-by. They were gangsters, known for ruling the neighborhood, with intimidation and violence. Their presence sent a shiver down Marcus's spine, though he tried to hide it. The taller of the two stopped directly in front of Marcus, sneering as he looked him up and down. "What do we have here?" he said, mockingly, nudging Marcus's empty cup with the toe of his shoe. Coins clinked together inside, rolling around uselessly. "Look at this guy begging for scraps, pathetic." His companion laughed, clearly amused by the display. "Yeah, maybe we should teach him some manners," he chimed in, leaning closer to Marcus. "What do you think, old man? You think you can sit here like you own the place?" Marcus didn't respond. He kept his gaze fixed on the ground, pretending not to hear them. Inside, however, anger simmered. He hated being treated this way, but he knew better than to provoke them. Gangsters like these thrived on fear. They fed off it, using it to assert dominance over anyone weaker than themselves. Marcus had learned long ago that fighting back usually ended badly, especially when outnumbered, but the gangsters weren't satisfied with silence. The leader crouched down, grabbing Marcus by the collar of his jacket. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he snapped, yanking him forward. "You deaf or something? Answer me." Marcus's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists involuntarily. Memories of combat flooded his mind. Training exercises, missions, the adrenaline rush of facing danger head-on. For a moment, he considered lashing out, teaching these punks a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. But then, rationality kicked. And what good would it do? Even if he managed to defend himself, there would be consequences. More thugs would show up, seeking revenge. Violence begot more violence, and Marcus had no desire to relive that cycle. Instead, he forced himself to stay calm, breathing deeply despite the rising tension. "Let go of me," he said quietly, his voice steady but firm. "I don't want any trouble." The gangster smirked, clearly enjoying the power dynamic. "Oh, so you can talk," he taunted, tightening his grip. "Tell me, soldier boy, what's a tough guy like you doing sitting here begging for change? Did your army buddies abandon you?" That comment struck a nerve. Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his chest. How did this man know about his military background? Was it the faded tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve, the insignia of his unit? Or was it simply a lucky guess? Either way, it hit close to home, stirring emotions he had worked hard to suppress. For a moment, Marcus considered explaining himself, telling them about the sacrifices he'd made, the battles he'd fought, the scars he carried both physically and mentally. But what was the point? These men wouldn't care. To them, he was just another target, someone easy to bully because he appeared powerless. As the gangsters continued mocking him, Marcus felt a strange sensation wash over him. It started as a faint tingling in his fingertips, spreading slowly, until it reached his core. Years of discipline and training kicked in, overriding his initial hesitation. Without warning, he twisted sharply, breaking free from the leader's grasp. Before the man could react, Marcus delivered a swift strike to his midsection, sending him stumbling backward with a grunt of pain. The second gangster lunged toward him, but Marcus was ready. Using techniques honed during countless hours of practice, he sidestepped the attack, grabbing his assailant's arm and twisting it behind his back. Within seconds, both men lay sprawled on the ground, groaning and clutching their injuries. Passers-by stopped to watch, some cheering quietly while others stared in disbelief. Standing tall, Marcus exhaled sharply, his chest heaving with exertion. For the first time in months, maybe even years, he felt alive. Not because he had beaten someone up, but because he had proven, to himself at least, that he still had fight left in him. As the gangsters scrambled to their feet and fled, vowing revenge, Marcus knew his life was about to change. Whether for better or worse, remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. He couldn't go back to being the man he was before. The aftermath of the confrontation left Marcus feeling a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, he felt a surge of pride and empowerment, something he hadn't experienced in years. For so long, he had allowed himself to be pushed around, convinced that fighting back would only make things worse. But now, standing tall after taking down 2 gangsters, he realized how much strength he still possessed. It wasn't just physical strength. It was mental resilience, the ability to rise above fear and reclaim control, even if only for a moment. On the other hand, Marcus couldn't shake off the looming sense of dread. These weren't ordinary bullies who would simply walk away and forget about what happened. Gangsters operated on a code of retaliation. If you humiliated them, they came back harder, angrier, and with backup. As Marcus sat back down on the curb, his breathing slowly returning to normal, he scanned the dimly lit street nervously. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every distant laugh carried an undertone of menace. He knew this wasn't over. Word of the incident spread quickly through the neighborhood. People talked, some admiring Marcus's courage, others warning him about the trouble he had stirred up. By the next morning, nearly everyone in the area knew about the homeless man who had stood up to the gang. The shopkeepers whispered among themselves as they opened their stores, glancing at Marcus from behind their counters. A few teenagers who usually hung out near the corner store approached him cautiously, asking questions about what had happened. "Did you really beat those guys?" one of them asked, wide-eyed. Marcus nodded briefly but didn't elaborate. He wasn't looking for attention or admiration. All he wanted was to survive another day. As the hours passed, Marcus noticed a shift in the way people treated him. Some offered him food, a warm sandwich here, a bottle of water there, while others gave him small change without hesitation. Even Sarah, a social worker who frequently visited the area to check on vulnerable individuals, stopped by to see him. She introduced herself with a soft smile, her voice gentle yet firm. I'm Sarah, she said, kneeling beside him. I've been hearing about what happened last night. Marcus looked at her warily, unsure of her intentions. Social workers had approached him before, promising help that never materialized. Over time, he had learned to keep his guard up, avoiding false hope. But something about Sarah felt different. There was sincerity in her eyes, a genuine concern that went beyond mere curiosity. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly, his tone betraying both skepticism and exhaustion. Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I just wanted to say, I think what you did was brave. Standing up to those guys, it takes guts." She paused, studying his face. "You remind me of my brother. He served too." That comment caught Marcus off guard. Few people understood what it meant to serve, to carry the weight of duty, sacrifice, and trauma. Most assumed soldiers came home as heroes, celebrated and supported. They didn't know about the nightmares, the isolation, the struggle to adjust to a world that moved on while you were stuck reliving battles in your mind. Marcus hesitated, then nodded slightly, acknowledging her words. Over the next few days, Sarah returned regularly, bringing supplies and conversation. At first, Marcus kept his responses short, wary of letting anyone get too close. But Sarah was persistent, patient, and kind. She shared stories about her work helping veterans reintegrate into society, describing programs designed to assist with housing, employment, and mental health support. Slowly, Marcus began opening up, sharing fragments of his own story, the camaraderie of his unit, the horrors of war, and the loneliness that followed. Each revelation was like peeling back a layer of armor, exposing vulnerabilities he had buried deep inside. One afternoon, as they sat together on the same curb where Marcus spent most of his days, Sarah handed him a flyer. "There's a support group meeting tomorrow," she explained. "It's for veterans, people who understand what you're going through. I think it could help." Marcus stared at the flyer, his brow furrowed. The idea of walking into a room full of strangers and talking about his feelings made him uneasy. He had spent years bottling everything up, convincing himself that silence was strength. But lately, the walls he had built around himself were beginning to crack. The encounter with the gangsters, the kindness of strangers, and Sarah's unwavering support, all of it had planted seeds of doubt. Maybe there was another way to live, a path forward that didn't involve constant struggle and solitude. "I don't know," Marcus muttered, fidgeting with the edges of the flyer. "What if it doesn't work? What if it's just another dead end?" Sarah placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You won't know unless you try," she said softly. "And even if it doesn't fix everything right away, at least you'll be taking a step toward something better. That's progress, Marcus. Progress matters." Her words lingered in his mind long after she left. That night, as he lay on a thin mattress in the shelter where he occasionally stayed, Marcus thought about the choices before him. He could keep living the way he always had, scraping by, avoiding conflict, and hoping for the best. Or he could take a risk, reach out, and see where it led. The thought terrified him, but it also sparked a flicker of hope, a tiny flame that refused to be extinguished. The following evening, Marcus found himself standing outside the community center where the support group met. His heart raced as he pushed open the door, stepping into a brightly lit room filled with folding chairs arranged in a circle. About a dozen people were already seated, chatting quietly among themselves. When Marcus entered, they turned to look at him, their expressions curious but welcoming. A middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair stood up and approached him. "Hi, welcome," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Linda. We're glad you're here." Marcus shook her hand awkwardly, unsure of what to say. "Thanks," he mumbled, taking a seat near the back. As the meeting began, each person introduced themselves, sharing their name, branch of service, and a little about their journey since leaving the military. When it was Marcus's turn, he hesitated, his throat tightening. But then he took a deep breath and spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm Marcus Army, been struggling for a while. To his surprise, no one judged him or pressured him to share more than he was comfortable with. Instead, they nodded understandingly, offering words of encouragement. One man, a former Marine named James, leaned forward and said, "We've all been there, brother. You're not alone anymore." By the end of the meeting, Marcus felt lighter, as though a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had been lifted. For the first time in years, he didn't feel completely isolated. Here were people who truly understood him, who had walked similar paths and survived. They exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch and support one another. As Marcus stepped back onto the street, he noticed the air felt crisper, the lights brighter. Something inside him had shifted, but life wasn't done testing him yet. The next day, as he wandered through the neighborhood, Marcus spotted a familiar figure leaning against a lamppost. It was the leader of the gang he had confronted earlier, flanked by several others. Their eyes locked, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. This was the moment he had been dreading, the reckoning. The gangster smirked, stepping forward with deliberate slowness. "So, we meet again?" he said, his voice dripping with malice. "You thought you could embarrass us and walk away. Unscathed? Think again." Marcus clenched his fists, bracing himself for what was to come. But instead of lashing out, he held his ground, staring directly into the man's eyes. "I don't want trouble," he said firmly, "but I won't let you push me around either." His calmness threw the gangster off balance. For a moment, there was silence, tension crackling in the air like static electricity. Then, unexpectedly, a voice rang out. "Leave him alone." It was Sarah, standing nearby with a group of shopkeepers and residents. Behind her, others joined in, shouting their support for Marcus. Caught off guard and outnumbered, the gangsters exchanged uneasy glances. Muttering threats under their breath, they backed away, disappearing into the shadows. Marcus exhaled sharply, realizing how close he had come to disaster. Once again, he had survived. Not because of brute force, but because of the connections he had started rebuilding. In the weeks that followed, Marcus continued attending the support group meetings, finding solace in the camaraderie he rediscovered there. With Sarah's guidance, he applied for temporary housing assistance and began volunteering at the community center, teaching self-defense classes to at-risk youth. Watching young faces light up with newfound confidence reminded him of his own potential, reigniting a sense of purpose he had thought lost forever. Though challenges remained, Marcus no longer faced them alone. He had taken the first steps toward reclaiming his life, proving to himself and to those around him that redemption was possible even in the darkest of times. The days following the standoff with the gangsters marked a turning point for Marcus, though he didn't fully realize it at first. Life had thrown him countless curveballs over the years, but this time felt different. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Marcus wasn't just surviving, he was beginning to live again. The support group meetings became a lifeline, offering him not only practical advice but also emotional healing. Each session brought new revelations, shared stories of struggle and triumph that resonated deeply with Marcus. One particular meeting stood out. A veteran named Daniel, who had served in the same unit as Marcus, recounted his own battle with PTSD and homelessness. His voice cracked as he described nights spent wandering aimlessly through city streets, haunted by memories of war. "I used to think I was broken beyond repair," Daniel admitted, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But then I realized something. Being broken doesn't mean you can't be rebuilt." Those words struck a chord within Marcus. He had always seen himself as damaged goods, someone irreparably scarred by his past. But hearing Daniel's story made him reconsider. Maybe the cracks in his soul weren't signs of failure. Maybe they were spaces where light could seep in, opportunities for growth and renewal. That night, as Marcus walked back to the shelter, he allowed himself to dream. Small dreams at first, like finding steady work or saving enough money for a modest apartment. Dreams he had long dismissed as impossible now seemed within reach. Sarah continued to play a pivotal role in Marcus's journey. She introduced him to various programs aimed at helping veterans reintegrate into society, including vocational training, workshops, and counseling services. At first, Marcus hesitated to commit fully, fearing disappointment, but Sarah's unwavering belief in him gave him the courage to take the next step. "You're stronger than you think," she often reminded him, "and you don't have to do this alone." Through one of these programs, Marcus enrolled in a self-defense instructor certification course. It was challenging, both physically and mentally, but it reignited a passion he hadn't felt since his military days. Teaching others how to protect themselves gave him a profound sense of purpose. He started volunteering at the community center, leading free classes for local youth. Many of the kids came from troubled backgrounds, dealing with issues like bullying, poverty, and violence. Seeing their determination and resilience inspired Marcus to push harder, to become the role model he wished he'd had growing up. As word spread about Marcus's classes, more people started showing up, not just teenagers, but adults too. Shopkeepers, teachers, even parents brought their children to learn from him. One evening, after a particularly energetic session, a young boy approached Marcus shyly. "Thank you, Mr. Marcus," he said, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. "This is for you." Marcus unfolded the paper to find a simple drawing of a superhero standing tall against a backdrop of skyscrapers. Beneath it, the boy had written, "To my hero." Marcus's throat tightened as he looked down at the child. "Why did you draw this?" he asked gently. "Because you're brave," the boy replied matter-of-factly. "And because you teach us to be brave too." That moment stayed with Marcus, fueling his resolve to keep going. If he could make a difference in even one person's life, all his struggles would be worth it. He began pouring more energy into his teaching, refining his techniques and expanding his curriculum. Soon, the community center couldn't accommodate the growing number of participants. With Sarah's help, Marcus secured funding to rent a larger space nearby, transforming it into a dedicated martial arts studio. The sign above the door read, "Strength through Unity." Despite his progress, Marcus knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The gangsters hadn't forgotten about him. Every so often, he'd catch glimpses of them lurking in the distance, watching him with cold, calculating eyes. They hadn't made another move yet, but Marcus sensed it was only a matter of time before they retaliated. Still, he refused to let fear dictate his actions. Instead, he focused on building alliances within the neighborhood, strengthening ties with shopkeepers, residents, and other community leaders. Together, they formed a loose network of mutual support, vowing to stand united against any threats. One afternoon, as Marcus was tidying up the studio after a class, Sarah arrived with an excited expression. "You won't believe this," she said, holding up a newspaper. On the front page was an article titled, "From Soldier to Savior, How One Man is Changing Lives." Below the headline was a photo of Marcus demonstrating a self-defense technique to a group of students. The journalist had interviewed several participants, all of whom praised Marcus for his dedication and impact. "He taught me how to defend myself," one teenager was quoted as saying, "but more importantly, he taught me how to believe in myself." Reading the article filled Marcus with a mix of pride and humility. He had never sought recognition. His goal had always been to help others quietly without fanfare. Yet seeing his efforts acknowledged publicly validated everything he had worked for. Donations poured in from across the city, enabling him to expand his programs and hire additional instructors. Local businesses offered discounts or free services to anyone associated with the studio. Even city officials took notice, inviting Marcus to speak at community events and policy discussions about veteran reintegration. With newfound resources and visibility, Marcus decided to tackle a bigger challenge, addressing the root causes of homelessness among veterans. Alongside Sarah, he launched a mentorship initiative connecting former soldiers with housing assistance, job placement services, and mental health counseling. They organized fundraising drives, awareness campaigns, and outreach programs, reaching out to those still living on the streets. Marcus often visited shelters and encampments, sharing his story and urging others to seek help. "I've been where you are," he'd say, "and I promise you, it gets better." His message resonated deeply with many. Some joined his classes, eager to learn self-defense and regain a sense of control. Others simply appreciated having someone who understood their pain, someone who listened without judgment. Slowly but surely, lives began to change, not just for the participants but for Marcus himself. Helping others heal helped him heal too, filling the void left by years of isolation. Yet despite his successes, Marcus remained grounded. He knew, better than anyone, how fragile progress could be. One misstep, one setback, and everything could unravel. That reality hit home one evening when he received a call from Sarah. Her voice trembled with urgency. "Marcus, there's trouble," she said. "The gang, they're planning something big, be careful." Marcus's heart sank. He had hoped the gangsters would leave him alone, focusing their attention elsewhere. But deep down, he knew retaliation was inevitable. As he hung up the phone, he glanced around the studio, taking in the faces of his students practicing diligently. These were his people now, the ones he had sworn to protect. Whatever came next, he vowed to face it head-on, not out of anger or revenge, but because it was the right thing to do. That night, as Marcus sat alone in his small apartment, he reflected on how far he had come, from a broken man sitting on a curb, invisible to the world, to someone making a tangible difference in the lives of others. The scars of his past still lingered, both visible and invisible, but they no longer defined him. They were reminders of battles fought and lessons learned, a testament to his resilience. The next morning, Marcus woke early, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Whether it was confronting the gangsters or continuing his mission to uplift others, he knew he wouldn't face it alone. He had built a community, a family of sorts, bound together by shared struggles and mutual respect. And in that unity, Marcus found strength, not just to endure, but to thrive. The tension in the air was palpable as Marcus prepared for what he knew would be a defining moment. The warning from Sarah about the gang's plans weighed heavily on his mind, but instead of succumbing to fear, Marcus channeled his energy into action. He spent the morning reinforcing the bonds he had built within the community, reaching out to shopkeepers, residents, and even local law enforcement to ensure everyone was aware of the potential threat. Though he didn't want to incite panic, he understood that preparation was key. That afternoon, Marcus gathered his students at the studio for an impromptu meeting. The room buzzed with nervous energy as they took their seats, sensing something serious was about to unfold. Standing before them, Marcus spoke with a calmness that masked his inner turmoil. "Listen up," he began, his voice steady but firm. "Some of you may have heard rumors about trouble brewing. I won't sugarcoat it. There are people who don't like what we're doing here. They see us as a challenge to their power, and they might try to stop us." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Marcus raised a hand to silence them. "Now, I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because I trust you. Together we've built something special, a place where people can feel safe, strong, and supported. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect that. But I need your help too." One of the older teenagers, Jamal, stood up hesitantly. "What do you want us to do, Mr. Marcus?" he asked, his voice tinged with both determination and uncertainty. Marcus smiled faintly, appreciating the young man's courage. "Stay alert," he replied. "If you notice anything suspicious, strangers hanging around, unusual activity, let me or Sarah know immediately. And remember, no matter what happens, we stick together. We don't let fear divide us." His words resonated deeply with the group. Many nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting a mix of resolve and admiration. Over the past months, Marcus had become more than just a teacher to them. He was a mentor, a protector, and a symbol of hope. Knowing that he trusted them enough to stand by his side filled them with pride and purpose. As the day wore on, Marcus remained vigilant, patrolling the area around the studio and keeping an eye out for any signs of trouble. By evening, the streets grew quieter, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Despite the peaceful ambiance, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked just beyond the shadows. He decided to stay late at the studio, ensuring everything was secure before heading home. Around midnight, as Marcus locked the front door, he heard faint footsteps approaching. His instincts kicked in instantly, and he turned to see three figures emerging from the darkness. It was the gangsters, led by their ruthless leader. This time, however, they weren't alone. They had brought reinforcements, nearly a dozen men armed with bats, chains, and knives. Their faces were grim, their intentions clear. Well, the leader sneered, stepping forward. Looks like we finally caught you alone, soldier boy. His voice dripped with malice as he gestured for his crew to spread out, surrounding Marcus. You humiliated us once. Nobody does that and gets away with it. Marcus clenched his fists, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He knew running wasn't an option. The odds were stacked against him, but neither was surrender. Drawing on years of military training and self-defense expertise, he positioned himself strategically, ready to defend not just his life, but everything he had worked so hard to build. Before the gang could make their move, a sudden commotion erupted behind them. From the alleys and nearby buildings, dozens of people emerged, students, shopkeepers, neighbors, all rallying to Marcus's side. Some carried makeshift weapons like broomsticks and planks, while others simply stood firm, their presence a testament to solidarity. At the forefront was Sarah, her expression fierce yet composed. "Leave him alone," she shouted, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "If you want to fight, you'll have to go through all of us." The gangsters hesitated, their confidence wavering. They had expected an easy target, not an entire community united against them. For a moment, nobody moved, the standoff crackling with unspoken hostility. Then slowly the leader lowered his weapon, glaring at Marcus with barely concealed hatred. "This isn't over," he growled, backing away with his crew in tow. Within moments, they disappeared into the night, leaving behind only echoes of their retreat. Breathing heavily, Marcus turned to face the crowd. His heart swelled with gratitude as he looked into the determined faces of those who had come to his aid. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without you." The incident solidified Marcus's bond with the community even further. What had started as individual acts of kindness had evolved into a collective movement, a network of people standing together against adversity. Inspired by their unity, Marcus redoubled his efforts to expand his initiatives, focusing not only on self-defense, but also on fostering dialogue and understanding between different groups in the neighborhood. Over the next few weeks, Marcus organized community meetings, inviting residents, business owners, and even former adversaries to sit down and discuss ways to improve safety and cooperation. These discussions weren't always easy. Old grievances and mistrust often surfaced, threatening to derail progress. But Marcus's unwavering optimism and leadership kept the conversations moving forward. Slowly but surely, bridges began to form, replacing animosity with collaboration. Meanwhile, the media coverage of Marcus's work continued to grow, drawing attention from organizations and individuals eager to support his cause. Donations poured in, funding scholarships for underprivileged youth, rehabilitation programs for veterans, and outreach efforts targeting homeless populations. Local schools invited Marcus to speak at assemblies, inspiring students with his story of resilience and redemption. Even city officials took note, implementing policies aimed at addressing systemic issues contributing to homelessness and violence. Despite the accolades and recognition, Marcus remained humble, deflecting praise onto those who had helped him along the way. "This isn't about me," he often said during interviews. "It's about all of us working together to create a better future. None of this would be possible without the incredible people who believe in this vision." Sarah watched with quiet pride as Marcus transformed not only his own life, but the lives of countless others. She knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that Marcus had found something far greater than personal success, a sense of belonging, a purpose bigger than himself. One evening, as they sat together outside the studio watching the sunset, Sarah turned to Marcus with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder how things might have turned out if that night with the gangsters hadn't happened?" she asked softly. Marcus paused, considering her question. Maybe, he admitted after a moment. But I think it's less about what happened and more about how I chose to respond. Every fall taught me something new. Every struggle pushed me closer to finding my footing again. If anything, I'm grateful for the lessons, the people, and the second chances. Sarah smiled, nodding in agreement. You've come a long way, Marcus, and you've inspired so many others to do the same. As the sky darkened and stars began to twinkle above, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he also knew he wouldn't walk it alone. With each passing day, he grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. What started as a desperate attempt to survive had blossomed into a mission to uplift, empower, and unite. And in that mission, Marcus found meaning, healing, and hope, not just for himself, but for everyone fortunate enough to cross his path. The weeks that followed the confrontation with the gangsters brought both challenges and triumphs for Marcus. Though the immediate threat had subsided, he knew the battle wasn't over, not entirely. The gang still roamed the streets, their anger simmering beneath the surface like a dormant volcano waiting to erupt. But Marcus refused to live in fear. Instead, he focused on strengthening the community he had helped build, knowing that unity was their greatest weapon against intimidation and violence. One of the first steps Marcus took was to formalize the network of support that had emerged during the standoff. He called it the SHIELD Initiative, a name inspired by the idea of protecting not just individuals but the entire neighborhood. The initiative brought together residents, business owners, veterans, and local authorities to collaborate on safety measures, conflict resolution, and youth empowerment programs. Weekly meetings became a cornerstone of the effort, providing a platform for open dialogue and collective decision-making. At these gatherings, Marcus often shared his insights about resilience and teamwork, drawing from his military experience. In the Army, we learned that no soldier fights alone, he would say, his voice steady yet impassioned. Every mission succeeds because of trust, communication, and mutual respect. That's what we're building here, a team that looks out for each other. His words resonated deeply with those who attended, many of whom had never felt such a strong sense of belonging. Shopkeepers began installing security cameras and sharing footage with neighbors to monitor suspicious activity. Parents formed patrols to escort children to and from school safely. Even former rivals, once divided by turf wars or personal grudges, started working side by side, realizing they had more in common than they thought. As the SHIELD Initiative gained momentum, so did Marcus's self-defense studio. Enrollment surged with people of all ages eager to learn skills that could help them protect themselves and their loved ones. Marcus expanded the curriculum to include lessons on de-escalation techniques and mental toughness, emphasizing that true strength lay not in aggression, but in control and compassion. He also introduced workshops specifically for women, teaching them how to defend against harassment and assault, a move that earned widespread praise from the community. Despite the progress, Marcus faced moments of doubt. Late at night, when the world grew quiet and his mind wandered back to the darkest days of his life, he sometimes wondered if he was doing enough. Had he truly made a difference? Or was he simply putting a band-aid on deeper wounds? These thoughts gnawed at him, threatening to undermine his confidence. But then he'd recall the faces of his students, their smiles, their determination, their gratitude, and the doubts would fade, replaced by renewed resolve. One evening, as Marcus prepared to close the studio, a young woman named Lisa approached him hesitantly. She was new to the area, having recently moved in with her aunt after fleeing an abusive relationship. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled flyer advertising one of Marcus's classes. I want to join," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know if I can do it." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his expression kind but firm. "You don't have to be perfect," he told her gently. "You just have to show up. Every step forward counts, no matter how small." Lisa nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Over the next few weeks, she attended every class, gradually gaining confidence and learning not only how to defend herself physically, but also how to assert herself emotionally. By the end of the month, she stood taller, her gaze steadier, her spirit unbroken. When she thanked Marcus for changing her life, he smiled humbly, reminding her that she had done the hard work herself. "I just gave you the tools," he said. "You built the foundation." Stories like Lisa's fueled Marcus's passion, reinforcing his belief in the power of community and perseverance. Yet even as he celebrated victories, he remained acutely aware of the challenges ahead. Homelessness, unemployment, and systemic inequality continued to plague the neighborhood, issues too vast for any single person, or even a group, to solve overnight. But Marcus refused to let despair take hold. Instead, he channeled his frustration into action, partnering with local nonprofits and government agencies to address these root causes. Through Sarah's connections, Marcus secured funding for a transitional housing program aimed at helping homeless veterans reintegrate into society. The program provided not only shelter, but also job training, counseling, and mentorship opportunities. Many participants credited Marcus with giving them a second chance, citing his unwavering support and understanding as key factors in their recovery. Word of Marcus's efforts reached unexpected ears. A journalist covering social justice issues decided to feature him in a documentary series highlighting grassroots movements transforming urban communities. Cameras followed Marcus as he led classes, attended meetings, and visited shelters, capturing candid moments of struggle and triumph. When the documentary aired, it sparked a wave of interest and support, drawing volunteers, donors, and advocates from across the country. The attention brought both blessings and burdens. On one hand, it amplified Marcus's message, inspiring countless others to join the fight against homelessness and violence. On the other hand, it attracted scrutiny from those who resented his success, namely, the gangsters who had sworn revenge. Rumors circulated that they were planning another attack, this time targeting not just Marcus but the entire community. When Sarah informed him of the latest threat, Marcus felt a familiar knot tighten in his stomach. But instead of succumbing to fear, he doubled down on his commitment to unity and preparation. He organized a neighborhood watch program, distributing walkie-talkies and establishing a hotline for reporting suspicious activity. He also worked closely with law enforcement, ensuring they were kept informed of any developments. Though tensions ran high, the community remained steadfast, refusing to be intimidated. One crisp autumn morning, as Marcus stood outside the studio, watching students practice drills, he noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was Jamal, one of his earliest students, now a confident teenager with dreams of becoming a police officer. Beside him walked his younger sister, clutching a backpack filled with books. "We're ready," Jamal announced proudly, gesturing to the crowd gathering behind them. Dozens of people, young and old, rich and poor, veterans and civilians, had come together to participate in a day of service dedicated to cleaning and revitalizing the neighborhood. Moved by their dedication, Marcus joined them, rolling up his sleeves and lending a hand wherever needed. Together, they painted murals on crumbling walls, planted trees along barren sidewalks, and repaired broken benches in the park. By sunset, the area looked transformed, not just physically but spiritually. Laughter echoed through the streets, replacing the usual tension and mistrust. For the first time in years, hope seemed tangible, a living, breathing force that bound everyone together. As Marcus surveyed the scene, his heart swelled with pride. This was what he had been fighting for, not just survival, but renewal. Not just individual victories, but collective progress. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, he knew they would face it together. That night, as he sat on the steps of the studio gazing at the stars, Sarah joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "You've done something incredible here, Marcus," she said softly. "Something that will last long after we're gone." Marcus sipped the warm liquid, letting her words sink in. "It's not about me," he replied after a moment. "It's about us, all of us. We've shown that change is possible even in the toughest places, and that's something worth holding on to." Sarah smiled, nodding in agreement. As they sat in companionable silence, the sounds of laughter and music drifting from nearby homes, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. He had come a long way from the man who once sat invisible on a curb, defeated by life's hardships. Now he was part of something greater, a movement fueled by courage, compassion, and connection. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't face them alone. And in that knowledge he found strength, not just to endure but to thrive. Months turned into a year, and Marcus's life had transformed in ways he never imagined. The community he helped build had grown stronger, more resilient, and deeply interconnected. The SHIELD initiative was no longer just an idea. It had become a cornerstone of the neighborhood, fostering trust and cooperation among people who once saw each other as strangers, or worse, enemies. Yet, despite all the progress, Marcus knew that true change required constant effort. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better, and for Marcus that was enough. The gangsters hadn't forgotten about him, though their threats had grown quieter over time. Instead of launching another direct attack, they resorted to subtle intimidation, graffiti, sprayed on walls near the studio, menacing stares during late-night patrols. Rumors spread to sow discord, but Marcus refused to let fear dictate his actions. He continued teaching self-defense classes, mentoring veterans, and leading community meetings with the same determination that had carried him through darker times. "They can try to scare us," he often said, "but they can't break us, not as long as we stand together." One chilly winter morning, as Marcus unlocked the studio door, he noticed something unusual taped to the glass, a handwritten note. It read, "You win. We're done." At first, Marcus thought it might be a trick, a ploy to lure him into complacency, but as days passed without incident, he realized the message was genuine. The gang had finally backed down, unable to compete with the unity and strength of the community. While Marcus didn't celebrate their retreat, he understood the pain and desperation that drove many young men into gangs. He allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had stood their ground, and it had made a difference. With the immediate threat diminished, Marcus shifted his focus to expanding his initiatives beyond the neighborhood. Inspired by the success of the SHIELD initiative, he began collaborating with organizations in nearby districts, sharing strategies and resources to tackle similar issues. He traveled to conferences, speaking passionately about the importance of grassroots movements and the role of veterans in driving social change. His speeches resonated with audiences, earning standing ovations and sparking partnerships that extended his reach far beyond what he had envisioned. Back home, the studio thrived under Marcus's leadership. Enrollment numbers soared, prompting him to hire additional instructors, including several former students who had excelled in the program. Among them was Jamal, now a confident young man with a clear sense of purpose. Teaching alongside Marcus gave Jamal a sense of pride and responsibility, reinforcing the values of discipline and service he had learned growing up. Together, they developed specialized workshops tailored to different groups, from seniors learning basic safety techniques to teenagers exploring career paths in law enforcement and public service. Marcus also introduced new programs aimed at addressing mental health challenges, particularly among veterans and youth. Drawing from his own struggles with PTSD, he created peer support groups where participants could share their experiences openly, free from judgment. These sessions became safe spaces for healing, helping countless individuals confront trauma and rebuild their lives. Sarah played a crucial role in organizing these efforts, leveraging her expertise as a social worker to connect participants with professional therapists and counselors when needed. Despite his growing influence, Marcus remained humble, deflecting praise onto those around him. "This isn't my story," he often told reporters and interviewers. "It's ours. Every person who shows up, every hand that extends help, they're the heroes. I'm just lucky to be part of it." His humility endeared him even more to the community, solidifying his status as a beloved figure. People trusted him not because of his charisma or accomplishments, but because of his authenticity. He listened when others spoke, empathized when they struggled, and celebrated when they succeeded. Whether it was offering advice to a struggling single parent or mediating disputes between neighbors, Marcus approached every situation with patience and compassion. As spring arrived, bringing warmth and renewal, Marcus received an unexpected invitation. A national veterans organization wanted to honor him with an award for his contributions to veteran reintegration and community development. The ceremony was set to take place in Washington, D.C., attended by dignitaries, policymakers, and fellow advocates. Though flattered, Marcus initially hesitated to accept, fearing the spotlight might overshadow the collective effort behind his work. But Sarah convinced him otherwise. "This is your chance to amplify our message," she urged, "to show the world what's possible when people come together." On the day of the event, Marcus stood nervously at the podium, dressed in a suit borrowed from one of the shopkeepers. As he looked out at the sea of faces, he felt a mix of gratitude and awe. He began his speech by acknowledging the sacrifices of soldiers everywhere, then transitioned to the challenges faced by veterans returning to civilian life. "War changes you," he said, his voice steady yet emotional. "But so does kindness, so does community. When someone believes in you, even when you don't believe in yourself, it makes all the difference." He went on to describe the journey that had brought him to this moment, the hardships, the victories, the people who had supported him along the way. By the time he finished, the audience erupted into applause, some wiping away tears. For Marcus, the recognition wasn't about personal glory. It was validation that his mission mattered, that the struggles he and others had endured were worth fighting for. Returning home, Marcus found the neighborhood buzzing with excitement. Residents had organized a block party to celebrate his achievement, decorating the streets with banners and balloons. Children ran around laughing, while adults grilled food and danced to music blasting from portable speakers. As Marcus walked through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting hugs, he felt overwhelmed, not by pride, but by love. This was his family, now bound not by blood but by shared experiences and mutual respect. That evening, as the festivities wound down, Marcus sat on the curb outside the studio gazing at the stars. Beside him sat Sarah, sipping a cup of tea. "You've changed so much since I first met you," she said softly, her tone reflective. "Do you remember that night? When those gangsters harassed you?" Marcus chuckled, nodding. "How could I forget? That was the night everything changed, for better or worse." "It was definitely for the better," Sarah replied with a smile. "Look how far you've come. Look what you've built." Marcus sighed, leaning back on his elbows. "I didn't do it alone," he reminded her. "None of this would have been possible without people like you, Jamal, Lisa. Everyone who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. "And that's why it works. Because it's not about one person. It's about all of us. You've shown us what's possible when we refuse to give up." For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the distant hum of the city. Marcus thought about the road ahead, about the challenges that still loomed, the dreams yet unfulfilled, but he also thought about the resilience of the human spirit, the power of connection and the beauty of second chances. Life had thrown him to the ground more times than he cared to count, but each fall had taught him something new. Each scar carried a lesson. Each struggle forged a strength he hadn't known existed. As he rose to his feet, ready to face whatever tomorrow held, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one filled with highs and lows, triumphs and setbacks. And though the path wasn't always easy, he knew he wouldn't walk it alone. With every step forward, he carried the hopes and dreams of a community that had become his own. Together they had proven that no matter how far someone falls, redemption is always possible, with grit, compassion, and a little help from those willing to believe. In the end, Marcus's story wasn't just about survival, It was about transformation, resilience, and the enduring power of hope. It was proof that even in the darkest corners of life, light could shine through, if only we dared to let it.